Wow, I didn't think I was going to share this. Okay. So last night I got a phone call from a family member, a sibling. Let's just be clear. And I was verbally assaulted, hung up on several times. It was not pretty. It did not feel good. My response is to love. It's hard. It's not easy sometimes, but my response is to love. I know I've mentioned it several times in here, but that video that I saw of the guy on the plane when everybody's saying, "You are my sunshine," and he shifted from anger and attack to like a little, almost like a little boy, like a person who just was collapsing in on his own realization that he had acted in a way that wasn't him. When anger surfaces, we get to be very present to the reality that underneath that is fear. Underneath that is a sense of hopelessness, helplessness. And I know what it stems from with the sibling. It's like, I get it. I understand where they're coming from. It doesn't make it easy to be on the receiving end of that. There is that wonderful article from years ago, Target Out of Range, that we can remain undisturbed amid the jarring testimony of the material senses because science is still enthroned. And that's a quote from Mrs. Eddy loosely. But how do we do that? How do we remain undisturbed amid the jarring testimony of the material senses? When someone is so steeped in the material view of things and feels so bereft of love, I can imagine that would feel very hopeless. And there would be a lot of anger around that. If we feel that life has been happening to us and we're out of control and there's nothing we can do about it, it's all out of our control. And I can imagine that that feels like being a victim and feels like there's nothing we can do about it. When we are on the receiving end of an assault of some nature, and you know my stories. I've been on the receiving end of physical assaults, verbal assaults, mental assaults. Like, is it really coming at me and is it really coming from them? No, it's not personal. It's not personal to them. They're not the source of it. And it's not personal to you. You're not the recipient of it. It's not personal. Aggressive mental suggestion is an impersonal attack. It is an impersonal quote unquote source. It's a false source. It's impersonal. It's a sense of reality that's separate from God. That's not possible. So, what looks like a lot of sort of bad power, false sense of power, is a false sense of the true power of God. It's a false sense of power. Do people suffer at the effect of that? Yeah, to human sense, yes. Was it challenging for me to forgive and love? For a minute, yeah. For several minutes. For a bit. I felt a bit in shock and stunned, kind of frozen, and then was able to pray. What supports us in that moment is the Christ truth, the true idea of God. The truth supports us. If you look at, and there were threats of legal action and all that stuff. And it's like, actually, please do hire a lawyer. I would really appreciate that because I know the lawyer won't be verbally abusive. So please do. I didn't say that at the time because I didn't think of it. But yeah, please do. That would be awesome because when two lawyers talk, You know what's going on? You know, and I get this from Legally Blonde, one of my favorite movies. Law is reason, passion free. It's reason, passion free. What does Mrs. Eddy say about reason? Reason is the most active human faculty. For right reasoning, there should be one fact before the thought, namely spiritual existence. Quote from Mrs. Eddy. Right reasoning. Reason is the most active human faculty. So if we're in a pickle, I love that phrase. Like, where did that come from? Where did the phrase, I'm in a pickle, come from? There's actually probably a really cool story behind that. There's probably some guy who used to make pickles and he found himself in a pickle. I don't know, but that's sort of funny. But when you're in a pickle, reason your way out of it based on divine law. If I stayed stuck in the human experience of what happened, it would be really challenging to forgive, move on, and move into a place of compassion and love. Because I would be stuck in well, you said this, and this is not true, and this is true, and battling with the stuff on the level of the argument, battling on that level, we're staying in the lie. Reason is the most active human faculty. So when we can reason through, see the issue for what it is, there's a lot of anger, a lot of vitriol, a lot of attack going on. Well, what's the issue underneath that? Fear, hopelessness, helplessness, a sense of lack, a sense of victimhood, all of these things that were going on. And you can translate the same thing when the onslaught that's coming to you seems like sickness or seems like sin. You can see it the same way. You can see through it and reason through it the same way. Sin, missing the mark, feeling misaligned with God or unaligned from God. Is that possible? That's the false sense that we could feel separate from. So reasoning through, based on the law of God, based on what the Bible gives us, based on what Jesus demonstrated, based on the law of God, the law of love. Where there is love, there is no fear. Love casteth out fear, the Bible says. Where there is light, there is no darkness. God is light. So we know these well-worn phrases from the Bible, wonderful phrases, the truth embedded in them. Let's put them into practice when it gets tough. Let's use them to uplift thought, to see the reality. I'm not seeing an angry sibling. I'm seeing a blessed child of God who seems to be operating out of a sense of fear. Bless their heart. Bless their heart. If they knew better, they wouldn't be acting that way. If they knew how loved they were, they wouldn't be acting out of a sense of fear. So is my responding in anger going to help them feel loved? Of course not. I don't think the individual would have been open at that point to hear, I love you. I think that probably would have, resulted in another slamming down of the phone, which doesn't really happen now that we have cell phones. It's just click. It used to be really actually satisfying to slam down the receiver. Do you remember those days? Landlines. Oh, well, it's a thing of the past. So where are we in the practice of this? The Bible says we do not speak in words taught by human wisdom, but in words taught by spirit. So the words that were thrown at me last night were taught by human wisdom. We're taught by, I wouldn't say human wisdom so much as false ego reasoning, different from divine reasoning. The human faculty of reason is going to be seen on a spectrum. And if we're utilizing human reasoning to battle and win and have power over rather than power with, big difference. Human reasoning in the effort to have power with, life is for us, not against us. We are with each other, not against each other. The power that we experience with each other is the power of God. The power we experience against each other is a false sense of ego trying to control where it has no control. And it's using reasoning falsely. So we have to be aware of that. Which camp are we falling in? Like, where are we on the spectrum of that if we're in a pickle? Being in a pickle. I actually really like that phrase. We do not speak in words taught by human wisdom, but in words taught by the Spirit, as we explain spiritual truths to those who have the Spirit. So we're not going to be explaining spiritual truths to those who are deep and thick in the false sense of ego and in a battle. We can know it ourselves in our own thought. But trying to explain it in the midst of battle, be guided by God on that. The Christ will lead you. The Christ truth will guide human consciousness in the way of love. And sometimes the best thing we can do is to be silent and know the truth of the individual and separate the error from the individual. It is only when we separate the individual from the error that we can then denounce the error. If we're still seeing it as a person, we cannot denounce the error. We're seeing it falsely. We're seeing it as coming from a person. That's not the reality of error. Error doesn't come from a person. There's only one person, God. Every individual is a reflection of the one person, the one idea, God. So if we're seeing error coming from a person, it's a false sense. We got to separate the error from the individual. Then we can go to town on that error and denounce it with the power of God. And what does that do? It not only frees them from the error, it frees us from the effect of error. That's where we find our safety. In God, not in battling the error and trying to squash it. Separating the error from the individual, separating the error from person, place, or thing. There is no circumstance, there is no person, there is no thing, object, mechanism, system that is the source of error. The source of error is a lie, so there is no source. It's a lie. It's a lie about the truth. So we got to be clear as spiritual warriors or spirit warriors. Incline thine ear unto wisdom and apply thy heart to understanding. We can be lifted up to the place of love, to the place of the ever-present love that is governing all. Let there be light is the perpetual demand of truth and love, Mrs. Eddy says. And that changes chaos into order and discord, she says, into the music of the spheres. And there actually is music of the spheres. They've actually recorded music of the spheres. I think one of the electron telescope, one of the ones that is floating out in space has actually recorded the music of the spheres. It's really glorious. Let there be light is the perpetual demand of truth and love. So if we know that's the perpetual demand, when we feel assaulted, the demand on us, the perpetual demand on us, is to recognize truth and love in that moment. What is God seeing in this moment? Where is God in the middle of this? Do I see God present right in the middle of chaos? changing chaos into order and discord into the music of the spheres. I would have loved to have heard the music of the spheres last night. That would have been awesome. I didn't until 2 this morning. 2 this morning I did, but that's what it takes. And that's okay. Like, be in the work of it, be in the joy of it, be in the discovery of it, be in the blessing of it. Because when we get faced with assaulted, that feeling of assault, opportunity, not assault. When you see a loved one who is battling addiction or dysfunction or mental illness or physical illness or emotional illness, financial illness, what do we do? Do we claim that as true for them? Or do we love them, love who they truly are, and see them free from the imposition of evil? What is it? It's like spiritual wickedness in high places. The devil, I mean, the Bible would sort of use very biblical terms. It's the attack of the Antichrist, essentially, something that seems other than God, that it looks like it has all this power, and it comes in with a big bluster and tries to make us feel like a victim. We can't be made to feel a victim. We get to stand with the armor of Christ, the armor of God, and be untouched, be the target out of range. I would say don't even be a target. That's a little bit of a misnomer. Like, don't even be a target. See yourself. I cannot be targeted. I cannot be a victim. I cannot be attacked because my true identity is hid with Christ and God. Cannot be attacked. Their true identity is hid with Christ and God. They cannot be attacked. They cannot be influenced by aggressive mental suggestion. They cannot be influenced by mortal mind. A false, Mrs. Eddy calls it, a false and temporal sense of truth, life, and love, which the phrase we use a lot in this community because it's really good to get clear about what is this thing, mortal mind, we keep talking about? Is there actually a mortal mind? It's just a false sense. It's a false sense of things. All truth proceeds from the divine mind, Mrs. Eddy says. All truth proceeds from the divine mind. So when truth is expressed, even in the midst of like verbal assaults, there may be some truth expressed in there. It's like, okay, so let's pull out the truth and recognize divine mind as being expressed. Even the tiniest little bit of divine mind expressed has more power than all the lies on the planet. The tiniest little truth. Truth outweighs error every time. Little zero, massive zero. Doesn't matter, it's still zero. Little sickness, big sickness. Doesn't matter, it's still zero. It's still an erroneous concept, an erroneous, mistaken idea. When explained, the whole universe, when explained on the basis of physical sense and presented as subject to growth, maturity, and decay, the universe, like man, is and must continue to be an enigma. And not only an enigma, but full of chaos and disorder. The universe of our lives. Look at your own universe. Take these big paragraphs of information and bring them right into your own experience. The universe of the experience I had last night. Okay. Growth, maturity, and decay. Well, there wasn't a lot of growth there. There was very little maturity there, and there was a lot of decay there. But, oh yeah, that's all part of the same system based on material evidence, matter-based system. Well, does matter have any power? No, matter is not the reality. Spirit is the reality. So we can observe, we can reason, we can walk our way through, We can separate the error from the individual, from the place, from the circumstance, and recognize there is no source of it, therefore it has no power. If it is not sourced in God, it has no power. Therefore, when we stand with God, the authority of God on our side, we can denounce the error very clearly and free every individual in the midst of it, free every individual from the error. It cannot have power if we don't personalize it and give it power. Personalizing it gives it a mouth, gives it a brain, gives it hands and feet, gives it a lower sense of human reasoning. I would say lack of reasoning, but on that spectrum of human experience, a lot of manipulation at the very low end of things, anger, fear, judgment, all that stuff that tends to prompt bad behavior. Except ye see signs and wonders you will not believe. So that's what Jesus was saying to the nobleman when he said, heal my son. Except ye see signs and wonders you will not believe. Like, are you willing to claim the reality of God before you see the evidence of it? Are you willing? It's like with that famous Chinese bamboo. Are you willing to claim that this is one of the fastest growing plants on the planet when you plant the seed and you don't see anything for 5 years? You don't see anything for 5 years. Stays under the ground. Still watering, still making sure it gets some sunlight on that dirt. Watering it for 5 years. Are you willing to know the power of God before you see the evidence? Are you willing to claim the power of God before you see the evidence? Are you willing to have the faith, the hope, the understanding before you see the evidence? Jesus challenged that nobleman whose son was sick. Challenged him. Except you see signs and wonders, you're not going to believe. So the nobleman said, sir, come down ere my child die, because his son was dying. So what is that saying? I know that the power of God is available here, and I know that you demonstrate that, Jesus. So I trust that when you show up, when the Christ appears, that dream of death will be broken. And with that statement, what does Jesus respond? Go thy way, thy son liveth. Once that thought is shifted, Jesus knows the healing is available for him. Go thy way, thy son liveth. The Christ is born in consciousness at that point. Just come down, my child's going to die. If you come, my child will die. If the Christ is here, I will see the reality. Every time we read these Bible passages, depending on what's going on in our lives, we can see them differently. We can see them specifically in the way that we need to see them and have the inspiration of thought, the inspiration of truth that shifts consciousness. Working with some clients recently, there's a lot of chemicalization going on. A lot of stuff coming to the surface to get washed away. Chemicalization is a really good sign. It's coming to the surface to be washed away. It doesn't hurt to have a shift of thought. It doesn't hurt. When you change your mind about something, does it hurt? No. And if thought is shifting from the material sense of something to the spiritual sense of something, sometimes it looks like a bunch of yuck coming to the surface. Yeah, be grateful. It's getting washed away. It cannot exist in a system that is based in love. It cannot exist in a system that is based in spirit. When you go into an office and you're dealing with a really disgruntled customer, do you bring in an atmosphere of love where the error cannot survive? It may come to the surface, but it can't survive. It's got to be washed away. Can't survive. Error cannot survive in love. Cancer cannot survive in love. Victimhood cannot survive in love and compassion. Victimizer, attacker, abuser cannot survive in love. It must be wiped away. It must be dissolved by love. Love hath dissolved it. There's that phrase from that line, from that hymn. The effect of this science, Mrs. Eddy says, is to stir the human mind to a change of base on which it may yield to the harmony of the divine mind. That's all we're talking about. That's what Jesus did over and over and over again. When he asked that question, you won't believe except you see signs and wonders. No, 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 come down ere my child die. Shift, change of thought. There's a change. And what do we do when we see the shift, either in ourselves or in somebody else? What do? We immediately side with truth. We don't bemoan the fact that it took them so long to get there, or took us so long to get there. Okay, up until now, I thought one way, or they thought one way. From now on, we think a different way. Shift of thought. Support the shift of thought. Don't keep going over the ground of the error. Shift immediately into the place of truth, because that's what we can build on. And when two lawyers are talking, without the anger, without all the emotion in there, it's just, let's reason this together based on the truth and based on the fact. Well, if we're basing it on the fact of our spiritual being, it becomes a lot simpler. If you're in the human spectrum of it and you're talking about human facts and figures and all of that stuff, you're going to see it depending on how clearly it represents the truth, the spiritual reality. You're going to see that as less and more harmonious. That's the nature of thought. Because Mrs. Eddy has this other passage about, the Christian Scientist understanding scientifically that all is mind, commences with mental causation, the truth of being, to destroy the error. Mental causation. What is causing the mental atmosphere? If it's based in mortal mind, we want to correct our sense of that, if it's in terms of another person, or if it's in terms of us. We want to correct our sense of that. Mental causation. And that's the only way we're going to find the solution and find the harmonious reality. Okay, let's bring it in. There's that, Mrs. Eddy has that phrase about there's no law of his to support the necessity of sin or sickness, and that we have divine authority for denying that, necessity and healing the sick. But we have divine authority for denying some necessity that sin and sickness are based on some law of matter. We have divine authority for denying that. And if we don't feel the strength of the divine in that, call on God. Just say, okay, God, come right here. Come right in here. I know you're here. And open my eyes that I can see the power of you in the midst of this. Like, God, where are you right now? And challenge ourselves to see God in the middle of it. Let God be the authority. We don't have to personally have the all the understanding to like, "Ugh." No, God is God is mind. God knows all. Let God be God. Just call on God in the middle of all that. In the middle of and when you're in a pickle, call on God. Let God be the authority and claim the authority of God in the midst of that to denounce the belief of sin, sickness, and death. It has no power to influence you and make you think that it's real. Okay. Many blessings. I'm gonna indulge me for a moment. I'm going into gallery view. I just want to see your little faces. They're only little because they're little on my screen. That's the only reason I say little. Oh, seriously. So much love to you. So much love. Feel it. Like hold hands in our little circle of community here and just feel the love of this group. Feel this. My heart is just bursting. So much love to you guys. Have wonderful days, nights, wherever you are on the planet, mornings, nights, and I will see you all tomorrow. Lots of love.